Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to the YouTube channel. If you don't know me, my name is William Tackett, and I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and pro competitor on the Austin, Texas scene. I travel all around, and I've been doing these kind of critique style videos. We just did one on Mike Israel. Check that out if you guys want on your way out today. And today we are reviewing Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg recently just got into business with Dana White, brought Dana White on board. So I just figured it would be fitting that we reviewed his jiu-jitsu. He likes doing MMA, he competes in jiu-jitsu a little bit on the side, and he mostly does it for fun. So we're gonna make sure to keep the critiques lighthearted today. But I'm excited to review his jiu-jitsu because he, I think, is a blue belt now, so probably doesn't have a ton of experience. So if he does see this, I hope he can learn a few tips. I myself have coached a ton of beginners, ton of white, blue, purple belts, and I hope to give a few tips for all you guys watching back home as well. Let's go ahead and get into it. So this is a round between Mark Zuckerberg and Lex Fridman, another famous individual that has an awesome podcast. Definitely check that out if you guys enjoy podcasts. He's a black belt, so this should be maybe more one-sided unless Lex is wanting to be a little bit nice and take it easy on Mark, which I would if I was in this situation, me being a higher level black belt going against someone like Mark who's a wider blue belt. Take it a bit easy, give him some good tips along the way, but still make it a fun roll for both you guys. We'll go ahead and get into it and see what happens, but I wanted to set the context early on. He is going against a black belt, so we can't be too harsh on judgment here. We got them going for some takedowns, Lex hitting that elbow pass, and Mark is reaching a lot with his hips pretty far back. So I want you to notice the collar tie here, kind of his other arm out of position as well. When we're wrestling, we want to try to maintain elbows in contact with our lats and our hands in good position to not only hand fight, but prevent against shots, using things like down blocks and being able to sprawl. When your hips are far back and you're reaching and you're putting a lot of weight on your opponent, it can lead to getting snapped down from like wrist snaps. People can slide back to your wrist and clear your hands off their shoulders. And since you're leaning a lot of your weight on them, you can fall down and end up in bottom position, which we want to avoid. So reaching like this is not something that I would recommend, but you know, Mark is still somewhat new, so he's got control over both ankles. Awesome. Maybe use both of those grips to throw the legs to the side if possible, but Lex ends up standing back up, and he shouldn't be able to stand back up if you still control those ankles. So if you think about it, holding their feet off the ground, they can't stand up unless they put their feet back on the ground. So as long as you have control over both ankles and can elevate them, makes it very difficult for our opponent to stand back up. And in the style of jiu-jitsu that I play, once I get my training partner on their back or my opponent, I try to keep them there. It's a really good kind of recipe for MMA, which I know Mark likes to participate in as well. So if he is looking to try to do MMA in the future, maintaining top position is going to be super important, because if you need to rest, laying on top of them and just kind of beating them up with body, head on some strikes can be a great way to rest. But on top of it, if you work really hard for a takedown to try to get someone down to the mat, maybe they're a superior striker than you are, and you want to get them to the floor, you don't want them to just stand up right away. So controlling both feet and then lifting those feet high off the ground and keeping them from getting back with their feet on the floor can be a great strategy against a good striker. And if we're talking MMA, they're just doing jiu-jitsu right now, but even then, if we want to secure guard passes and get to submissions, you got to keep them on their back. We see a good sprawl. I like that. Circling around to the back is Lex Grambies. Now, this is where I think a little bit of his lack of experience is going to shine. So whenever you're in this kind of top position, and you can see here how his legs are both kind of just trying to get hooks in at the same time. He's not really picking a side to try to win that battle early on. Normally when I'm behind somebody and I get a seatbelt, I like to opt for the body lock first because it prevents me from kind of falling off the top. Seatbelt, you get a little high, you could slip off the top. But either way, body lock or seatbelt, you got to pick a side that you want to get your hook in first. And in this instance, since he's kind of off to Lex's right side, I would recommend trying to get the right side hook in first. Create a knee wedge. That space that we see between Lex's elbow and knee can be a great opportunity to slide your knee and make a wedge there to where now he technically can't get elbow to knee connection anymore if our knee's now in place. So that can lead to us pulling them to that side and establishing that hook and getting one hook at a time rather than kind of just jumping on the back like this. We can see how he has both legs kind of wrapped around. It looks like he's simultaneously going to throw the hooks in. And watch what happens. Lex kind of rolls, and then they land in this position where Mark's on his back. Lex is kind of getting his hips out in a way because there's no hooks involved. And Mark is forced just to kind of hold on to the seatbelt and hope that kind of secures the position and doesn't end up in resulting in him being on bottom. So what's going to happen here probably, if Lex is going to do things correctly, he's going to try to use the floor to kind of peel Mark off of his back. And if we're behind somebody, we just sprawled, got behind them, and are trying to get our hooks in, the last thing we want is to now miss all of that and end up on bottom. So definitely try to take your time there, hang out in that turtle position, get a good knee wedge, fight those hooks in, and then you can start getting the back safely without falling off. So see, Lex kind of uses the floor to peel Mark off. Mark does do a great job at getting back to top position and not ending up on bottom, which is kind of the main thing that you don't want to happen from there. But see, again, like Mark's just reaching for collar ties. And it's totally cool to get collar ties. Like, collar tie is a technique, it's a form of control, but if we're not doing anything with it, it can be a waste and it can be a big telegraph. If I'm going to be constantly reaching for your neck, reaching, you can now kind of time that. And when I go to reach, you can hit an elbow post or just kind of clear the hand out of the way or duck under it entirely and take a shot and get into my legs, because my arms are now up here, not protecting my legs, rather than being in good position still. So if you get a collar tie, use it to set up an attack, something like a snap down or throw by, or trying to control our partner's weight and create angles, rather than just kind of reaching to reach. It can be a bad habit, and bad habits are always harder to break than establishing good habits. I would much rather see him just focus on keeping elbows in, and when he does get collar ties, kind of tying up with both hands and maintaining like head to collarbone connection or head to head connection, rather than being kind of far away and just reaching. It can be a bad habit. It can be hard to break if you develop that habit. So early on, guys, white or blue belt days, like Mark is here, try to not build bad habits. And the best way to do that is to communicate with your coach. Like, hey, what bad habits do you see that I have? What can I fix? And then just fix those bad habits. That can almost be more important than learning new techniques. We got 2-on-1 by Lex and a snatch single by Mark. That's awesome. Snatch single leg is one of the highest percentage takedowns for jiu-jitsu. And he changes for the body lock, which if you guys watched my best takedowns for jiu-jitsu video, I forget the exact title of it, but I'm ranking different takedowns for jiu-jitsu. I mentioned the snatch single to body lock being high on the list, and he just used it perfectly here. And it's a great example of being able to go from snatch single right to the waist, and it gives you a good look at maybe getting the back again. And he gets the throw by all the way to the back. He could hit a mat return here, but he opts to switch back to the single leg, which is not a bad thing if you're just trying to get your training partner to the ground. But I would never, in my situation, me being kind of a back taker, I would never abandon a rear body lock for a single leg. And I want to backtrack a little bit, because there maybe is like one scenario that I would let go of the body lock for a single leg, maybe the finals of some really, really big tournament, and there's like 5 seconds left on the clock. I need to get him down and score ASAP. And I've already had little to no success taking them down to the ground with the rear body lock. I've maybe failed at it 1 or 2 times already. Then I might change to the single leg to just try to get a quick score. But if it's an open roll like this, it's not a skill that I would necessarily train. I would prefer to train the back taking skill, getting them down to the mat from the rear body lock, establishing hooks in the choke. Because for jiu-jitsu, getting behind and getting the finish is the most dominant way to finish the fight, most effective, and it's really hard to get subbed when you're behind somebody on their back. Whereas here, we can see he's in an open guard, and a lot can go wrong there. If we're talking MMA, you can get up kicked, you can get caught in submissions. In jiu-jitsu, the guy could stand back up pretty easily or hunt for submissions. So I would prefer to be behind them on their back. So although it's not a terrible technique going from rear body lock to single leg, but in the scenario that we're talking jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu rules and jiu-jitsu goals, you want to get the finish. So we want to keep chasing the back rather than just try to get a quick 2 points. He's controlling those ankles well, but I'd like to see him cut some angles, throw those ankles to the side and try to get some angles. He seems to be pretty hesitant in this role. A lot of posting, keeping his weight back. We can see here he's kind of backing out of Lex's guard, which we want to do the opposite, right? We want to engage and force pressure on our opponent's guard, which would lead to more successful guard passes. And then also just the more often we engage, the more looks we get at real jiu-jitsu. And the more looks we get, the more reps, the better we get quicker. If we're constantly avoiding certain positions, then we're not actually training them and not getting better as quick as we could. See here, he's just kind of posting and backing up a lot, right? So with wrestling and passing, all of that, we want forward pressure, dealing with this 2-on-1 that Lex is throwing at him. He's doing a lot of the Russian kind of 2-on-1 grip, and it's a good grip, but just kind of pulling your arm back is a recipe for them shooting in on you. So I would like to see him maybe kind of peel at the hands and peel the hands off the wrist and then maybe re-engage. Don't just try to rip your arm back when they have a 2-on-1. Then we see a shot by Lex, brings it up, gets the takedown. Now we get to see kind of Mark off of his back. Good angles. Now notice how Lex immediately tries to create an angle. So if you look at like someone's center line, the line that cuts their body in half, we want to be constantly off to the side of that center line when passing the guard, maintaining our angle. Kind of similar when wrestling, you want an angle rather than just shooting in on square hips that can sprawl on us. We want to create angles to have cleaner entrances on our shots. Same thing for passing. We want to maintain that angle, and look how effective that is for Lex. He's able to create that angle, and it makes it much harder for basically Mark just to lay there and not get his guard passed. Now he's forced to kind of shrimp, try to bring his knee back in, and that can be very tiring. So maintaining that angle can be a great way to not only pass on top, but fatigue the person on bottom, which would lead to guard passes later on. He goes to the knee on belly here. Yep, Mark's doing a good job getting back to his side. That's what it definitely needs to do from here. Establishing frames, and it looks like Lex is going for an Americana or key lock. And yeah, that's a finish there. Not a very common finish. We don't see this often at a high level because of, I guess, the difficulty. It's hard to submit really good guys with a basic submission like this. The Americana requires your arm to be kind of out by your side. It's like out by your head and in this 90-degree angle. And most high-level guys are good at keeping their arms in nice and tight and keeping strong frames. So getting their arm out here can be difficult. And when they do get the arm out, if you're able to push their elbow off the mat. So we got Lex here. We got his elbow is not even on the floor. So this Americana is not even as tight as it could be. So if Lex dropped his left elbow down to the mat next to Mark's face, it would make this submission a whole lot tighter and harder to escape. But Mark doesn't understand how to escape this, so it doesn't really matter too much. But if Mark took his right hand and he posted off of Lex's elbow, he's getting Americana here, and he pushed his elbow and opened up Lex's elbow even more to where it took Lex's elbow that's only a few inches off the mat and made it really far away from the floor. He could actually retract the Americana arm by pushing the elbow and pulling the Americana arm back into good position to where now he couldn't get subbed. So from here, he just kind of opted to tap, which is a great decision. I'm not advocating for not tapping at all, but there's time and places for when you can go for late stage escapes and defenses from submissions. And there, I think there was a good opportunity for him to post on that elbow that was off the ground and start kind of turning in and pulling that arm free and escaping that Americana. Again, we got Mark just backing up and posting. That is nice, though. He did do a good job kind of drawing Lex in by backing up and then shooting as Lex comes forward, for that snatch single leg. I like that a lot, but I want him to mix up some forward pressure as well. Seems to be moving back quite a bit. Now that he's got the single leg, he needs to get the foot either all the way up into his armpit or keep it in between the legs. He changes to the double leg, solid. So notice that right there. He picked his feet up and it forced Lex's back to go to the ground again. That's awesome. And he cut a solid angle as Lex was trying to prevent the guard pass, and he got behind him. Now, he's letting Lex sit up here. This is not something that I would do. I would try to keep them on their side until I get my top leg over, because I'm trying to establish hooks from here. So once I pass, and once I get that seatbelt, I have my chest to back connection. Now all that's left is for me to throw my leg up and around Lex's waist. So in this scenario, we see Mark, his right leg could go around Lex's waist, and then he could pull him all the way to that side and do a chair sit style back take. Really good back take, very high percentage at all levels. And it's gonna be very difficult to do that if you allow Lex to sit up. So Lex is now sitting up. He can guard both hooks a little bit easier. And then now we can see him lose chest to back connection. So keep them on their side there, and it would be a little bit easier to hit that chair sit back take. He looks like he's going for a north-south choke here, or some variation of it. I'm not a huge fan of the north-south choke. It does work. Dorian Oliveras is a great north-south choke, but I find it can be easy to escape. Lex is being a good training partner there, and it looked like he kind of didn't defend too well. If you frame their hips and turn into the north-south choke, it'd be hard to finish. But that's where Dorian Oliveras does a good job at changing from the north-south. And when you turn in, he threatens the high elbow guillotine, similar to how Marcelo Garcia did it back in the day. He defends the shot by going guillotine, but they land on the wrong side. This is the right side for Lex's standpoint, but on Mark's standpoint, when trying to defend a shot via guillotine, you want to fall to the side of their head for a few reasons. One, it allows you to be able to choke them a whole lot easier if you're falling towards their head, because you can use your lat and the weight of you kind of turning on that side to compromise their posture, to bend their neck, and that makes it easier to choke them. The rigid neck, when they're high in your armpit, it can make it really difficult to choke them. So once you get on your side and get a bend in their neck, it makes it easier to get the finish, but it also prevents them from being able to pass your guard. So I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but try to put your head on the mat and pass to the same side as your head. It's really, really hard. You normally got to be cross body. Your head's got to be on one side and your legs on the other. So if he was able to fall all the way to the side of the head, Lex couldn't pass to that side. You'd have to pass all the way to the other side. And since they're on that side, it's going to be very difficult for him to clear without Mark catching him with his legs and then maybe finishing the guillotine. So as the takedown's happening, I would like to see Mark, when he gets the guillotine, kind of initiate the fall to that side rather than letting Lex dictate which side they fall to. So we see the guillotine here, and he could be really heavy on that head. He almost did it, but then they fell all the way to the other side, which now is going to result in his guard getting passed and maybe Von Flue choked if he holds on to the head. Lex doesn't look like that's what he's going for. And Mark recovers. Nice. Gets back to the close guard. Solid fundamentals. And see that right there that Lex just did where he grabbed his feet and threw him to the side. That's what I would love to see Mark kind of use when he's on top and holding both those ankles. Anytime you guys get both of their ankles, throw them to the side and get your angle. And then now start initiating your guard passes. But it's hard to initiate guard passes when you're straight in front of them. But yeah, Lex is awesome. Very smooth jiu-jitsu. And Mark's not looking bad either with another snatch single leg. And he runs the pipe. It's going to be difficult to run the pipe against someone that's resisting 100% if their foot's on the outside like that. They can use their foot almost like a wedge. As they extend their leg, it creates distance between you and them and makes it difficult to pull them to that side. So we can see here the foot on the outside of the leg. This is a really good defense by Lex. He has the foot on the outside of the leg. And he's just kind of like going with the flow. I mean, he's rolling with a less experienced individual. And they're clearly not rolling at a super high pace. So if Mark tries to pull him to that side and Lex kind of extends that leg and uses the whizzer, it'd be very difficult for Mark to complete the takedown. Maybe Lex doesn't know how to do that. I'm not going to give Lex extra credit that maybe he doesn't have. Like maybe he just doesn't know that and he got taken down. That can happen. But most of the time, someone that's comfortable defending takedowns and single legs specifically, they're going to try to get their foot to the outside like that, establish a whizzer and pressure off of that leg to make it very hard for you to take them down. So that's why I would like to see Mark maybe pull the leg all the way up into his armpit and try to trip the posting leg, or keep the leg in between his thighs, kind of sandwich them together to prevent from that kind of wedge that Lex is creating there. But he gets the takedown and he's back here in top position, controlling the feet. And he does a great job controlling the feet and cuts the angle. And now he's behind him yet again. Pull him to his side. He's got the seatbelt. Great time to go for chair sit. Throws the leg over. He needs to pull him all the way to the other side. And he does it. Nice. Very, very good. And gets the hook in. One thing he does really well here is he's stretching Lex out as he's pulling him to the other side. That's really important because if they're balled up, they're more likely to be kind of less space for you to get your foot in. And also they can just clear them much easier than if you stretch them out. It's very difficult for them to reach down and kind of fight those hooks off. And there's more space for your foot to slide in. And he did a very good job of that. Nice chair sit back take by Mark. He seems to be a quick learner because the first time Lex was able to get out and the second time he did things correctly and got the back take. Let's see if he can go for the finish here. I would like to see him keep stretching Lex out and maybe switch off to a body triangle. Mark does have long legs. Gets the rear naked choke. Lex wasn't given a whole lot of hand fight and Mark capitalized on that. Nice work. Again, reaching a lot and posting a lot. I would love to see him hand fight a little bit more and keep those elbows a little bit tighter. Okay, so it looks like this is round 2. That was the end of the first roll. So we'll see how round 2 goes, and we'll see if there's any strategical differences from either Lex or Mark here. Mark's controlling both feet. Great opportunity to throw him to the side like we were talking about. Cut that angle. He's moving a lot, which is awesome. I love movement on top, but move them too. You don't want to do all the work if you don't have to. So throwing their legs to the side as you cut the opposite direction can give you twice as much distance with half as much work, really. Running to the back does a great job of following and getting behind them. That must be due to some of the MMA training. I love seeing it. He has the top hook right now. He needs to pull Lex all the way to make it a bottom side hook. All right, he abandons it. He needs to switch his arms. Looks like he's doing so. And he can go back to that chair sit. But he doesn't have seatbelt right now. He has a body lock. It's going to make it a little bit difficult for the chair sit. Okay, he's got top hook. He needs to pull him all the way to the other side or go mount, which he attempted, but he missed it. And that's probably because he had the body lock. It can be difficult to mount from there. They got a lot of frames. And Lex hits a really good butterfly sweep. And a nice little hip switch pass. Oh, it switches back the other way. He's stunting. But Mark's still active, still elbows to knees, maintaining good basic positioning from his guard. Maybe use that outside leg to push him off you. So if we want to look a little bit closer, we can see when Lex creates this angle here. We see Mark, he is not in front of Lex here. Lex is off to the side, so he needs to reestablish that angle. So one thing that he could do is he could take his left leg and he could swing his left leg kind of around his right leg and post off of Lex's chest and use that to kind of push Lex away as he retracts his right leg to establish kind of that center line again. But instead, we see him posting off the ground a lot. So we can see here that he has his left leg posted off the floor and he's fully committed to shrimping. And that's totally cool if you're like not super mobile with your hips. You can't like just throw your leg all the way around. But if you stretch, 15, 20 minutes after class every day, a great way to develop flexibility, especially with like the pigeon stretch, to develop that glute flexibility so you can pummel that leg around. Then you should be able to take this foot off the ground, the left foot, and bring it all the way to the other side and post off of Lex's chest. And then now kind of push him as we reestablish our other leg and we can get both feet on the hips and recover the guard much more efficient than what he's doing here, where he's just trying to shrimp and bridge. And see, that results in Lex just mounting because the legs are not there to like keep Lex from mounting. If my knees are tucked to my chest, you can't mount me, but if my feet are on the ground, you can just step over to mount. So playing guard in general, not a good idea to put your feet on the ground. Always try to keep your feet on your opponent when you can. Now, another thing that I'm going to critique, I know it's kind of my job to critique with this style of video. I don't want to be too harsh because Zuck is still new, but here he's wrapping up Lex's waist. Not a good idea at all. In bottom mount, it's a recipe for disaster. I can't even count the amount of submissions that I would be happy to go for if I was in top position when someone holds my waist like this. So instead of holding the waist, there's really no benefit to it. The only thing that maybe has something to it is if you're holding with locking your hands around the back of their waist to keep them from posturing up so they can't punch you in MMA. There's something to that, but even then it's only buying you time and it's just gonna gas you out. Holding their waist, they're gonna posture up and push your face down and then your grip is gonna eventually break anyways and they're gonna punch you and then you have to scramble anyways. So might as well just start trying to scramble and get your frames and establish a guard again than just kind of buying yourself time by locking your hands around their waist. But he's not even doing that. He's just holding the lat, which is not gonna do anything but put his arm in danger. So I'd like to see, instead of him holding his hand around the lat, instead take that hand, bring it down and wedge it in between Lex's knee and Mark's hip. If he can do that, then he can now use that frame to create space between Lex's knee and his hip. And then his knee can now fill in that space and he can recover a guard or a half guard. But this kind of wrap is not good in any bottom position. In bottom side control, bottom mount, or bottom knee on belly, you don't want to like just hug their waist. It's not effective. Okay, well, he is framing on the far side, it seems, and he does use that to establish a half guard. So he did the right thing. He just had an unnecessary grip that put himself at risk. So don't do that. Do what he did on the other side. Get that frame in and recover to half guard. And look, he's got his underhook and he's coming up. This is awesome. Really good work. Nice. Very, very good old school style sweep. Comes up with that underhook and lands in a folding pass position. Can walk around the backside and a great opportunity to go back for that chair sit. Lock those hands in the seat belt, throw the leg over. But notice here, notice his chest is almost on top of Lex's chest, rather than his chest being behind Lex's shoulders. When you're trying to take someone's back, the main thing that you want with your upper body is chest to their back connection. Chest to back connection is going to save you a lot of the time when you don't have hooks in, and especially here, because if you don't have chest to back connection, they can turn into you and then now basically get their back to the floor. So now their back's hidden and you're not going to be able to take it. So if he was able to use his chest to kind of force Lex to stay on his side by driving with that chest, acting like a steamroller, then he could keep Lex from turning in. But it looks like Lex is going to turn in and just result in now being in top side control, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But again, if we're trying to chase the back and we want to get the finish from the back, you got to maintain that chest to back connection and you don't want them to turn into you. And he's scooping the far arm, which is actually preventing Lex from turning away. So maybe his goal isn't to take the back, it's to maintain top side control. But he had too much space there, and that lets Lex bring his knee in. So maybe need a hip connection a little bit more. Hits the snatch single again. Change it to body lock once more. Solid. Let's see if we can see a mat return here. But he changes off to the single leg again. It's almost like we're watching the same video. So he definitely has a set of skills that he likes to go for. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster if you do that. You don't want to post on the mat in between your training partner's legs. This is very, very important. When you take them down, and if you're trying to pass and maybe they invert, you don't want to put your hand on the floor in between their legs. If you're in guard, close guard, another example, I'm in between their legs, I don't put my hand on the mat. If they're open guard and they're kind of inverted like this, and we put our hand on the floor, we are going to get caught in an arm bar if they go for it. It's not a matter of if or whatever. You might get your arm extended and then maybe turn your elbow and then now you're stuck in an omoplata. But either way, it's not a place that we want to be in. A good example of this is when Gary Tonin got subbed by Shizinski at the ADCC. Similar arm lock attack. Mika Galval hit this against Pedro Mourinho back at Third Coast Grappling years back as well. We just see it all too often. It's not something that you want to do. Don't post that hand on the mat. It's a recipe for disaster. All right, Lex kind of inverts and Mark does a good job following the head. This would be a good opportunity to maybe change to a front headlock attack. But now Lex is flattened out. So he's probably going to go for that north-south choke again. But see there, this is kind of why I'm saying Lex is being nice, because he didn't have it. Lex was turned into him, right? We see Lex facing Mark right now, and he's still facing Mark. Mark clearly starts going for the north-south choke right now, and Lex is not in danger. He's facing Mark here, and the lat's not driving into his neck, but watch, he turns and gives him the choke. So this is just a good example of a nice black belt that's taking care of the lower rank and kind of showing him what it's supposed to feel like when you have the sub and things. But this is also why I don't like the north-south choke as much, because it is kind of easy to defend if you just turn in really hard and frame. Now, we did mention that you can switch off to the guillotine and stuff, but I don't know if Mark knows how to do that or not. So Lex is being nice. Watch. Turns in, boop, pops his chin up so that Mark Zuckerberg can now get the north-south choke, which is fine. It's totally cool. I do that all the time. I'll give people submissions, help build their confidence a little bit, get them good reps in, because you're never going to get good at a position if you don't get reps in on it. So I like to be that opportunity for them sometimes, give them the reps. And then also, it's a good opportunity to potentially fight out of a bad position for myself. Maybe I want to fight out of a fully locked in north-south choke. So I might pop my chin up, let them lock it in. They start squeezing, and then now I start fighting. But I think Lex is being nice here. More hand fight here. I would love to see some level changes by Mark. That was a good one. Kind of a feint on a level change. Lex pulls guard. But Mark's moving backwards, so he's not going to keep him on his back. He's not going to get any pressure going. We see some wall wrestling now. This is kind of interesting because Mark is an MMA guy. Nice. Good use of an underhook to kind of switch the position and hits that snatch single and does a great job at using the wall to his advantage. Drive into them, they're leaning against the wall, and if they're leaning against the wall, you pull their feet out, they just slide right down to the floor, and that was a great use of that. So solid takedown by Mark. You can definitely tell that he's comfortable on the wall. He's done some MMA training, but he allows Lex to wrestle up on his leg here. So he whizzers out well and sprawls, forces the front headlock. Lex does a good job at clearing. Hits a snatch single kind of again. I'm not a big advocate for head outside single legs with that style of positioning. I've seen it go wrong too many times. It's happened to me multiple times where I shoot my head to the outside like that and I get choked like play instantly. And I've done the same thing to a bunch of other people. So like watch, we'll see here. Mark shoots in. See how far his head is from Lex's hip. If Lex, instead of kind of going for down block and underhook, instead of using that to kind of pry him off, he just wrapped up Mark's head. Mark would have a really hard time not getting put on the side of his head. Just like how we talked about earlier in the video, Mark wants to get Lex to the opposite side of his head. So he wants to use his head to drive to finish the takedown, not create space between Lex hip and his head. That's what Lex wants, to be able to fall to that side and finish the front headlock. On top of it, I've seen scenarios where people go for something like a butt drag, where you basically grab the inner part of their upper hamstring and you pull them down to the mat, and it's a really good way to get your head spiked from this position. If Lex went for like a butt drag, he would pull Mark's head directly into the mat, and this has actually become illegal, at least at one point in time, within the IBJJF circuit, because there was a lot of injuries that happened with kind of that head spike. And I don't know if you guys have had it happen before or not, but getting your head spiked is like the worst thing that can happen for your neck. Like I've gotten my neck tweaked sideways. I've got my neck kind of crushed in a neck crank. But whenever I get my head spiked, it's so much worse. It stings a whole stinger down your back, and oh dude, it's not good. So I don't like head outside single leg like this. If he was tighter on the leg and had connection between his ear and Lex's like hip lower lat area and was driving with his head to put all of Lex's weight to the posting leg, then I could see a use for it. But here, where he goes to run the pipe, as he goes to run the pipe, that can be a great way, as they're falling, for his head to get slammed into the mat and cause a really bad stinger, which we want to avoid. We always want to avoid injuries, especially when there's other options that are safer. And this option is just like not that efficient. You can get guillotined. You can also get your head spiked. So the other option, like driving with your head and maybe switching off to a double or finishing like the high crotch variation, would be a much safer and more effective option for jiu-jitsu. But he gets a takedown either way, and he's in top position. I love the knee staple here. This is a great use of engagement that he wasn't doing earlier. He's now engaging the guard using forward pressure, stapling the leg. Even we can see here his toes are active, where his toes are curled on the mat rather than having laces down, and he's driving in to Lex. This is great. Really good top pressure by Mark. Good adjustments. Now he gets kind of put in this X guard here, and he just decides to accept the sweep, which is totally cool. Sometimes, we don't know what to do. Just falling back to your back's not a bad option. Gets his guard past the mount again due to that lack of like knee to chest position. So keeping like those knees to the chest is really important. You don't want to have your knees far away from your chest. That's how they just mount you really quickly. Like I said, it almost feels like we're watching the same video. Maybe we are, and I just didn't realize. All right, well, that's time. I like Mark Zuckerberg's style. I think it's going to be very effective the longer he trains. Going for takedowns, going for guard passing, kind of passing out in the distance like that, constantly searching for front headlocks and circling to the back. I think it's a really good style that's super effective. And I think when we start jiu-jitsu, that's almost one of the most important things, is figuring out what style we want to play. Do we want to play guard? Do we want to pass? Do we want to go for takedowns, or do we want to try to sweep to get on top? Like, what is your style? Try to determine that early on when you start jiu-jitsu, and it's a good way to progress much faster. Keep people within that kind of realm and just develop a whole lot of techniques there. It's a great way to get better very quickly, and you can tell he has like a lot of good coaches around him, or else he wouldn't kind of have an idea of what game he wants to play. There's a lot of guys I've encountered over the years that I've trained with or trained that know a lot of jiu-jitsu, but they're not really effective with any of it in training because they just kind of go for this there and they go for this there and they don't really have any direction. So having like a general game that you're wanting to play and keeping the match within that game is a great way to get better and just be more effective, especially when it comes to competing, which Mark competes. Maybe we review one of those matches next if you guys like it. Comment down below if you have any other suggestions on maybe topics that we go over, other people we review next, or suggestions on like my whole setup. I'm still new to this whole YouTube thing. So if you have any tips for me, definitely comment down below. And please check out my school program On the Way Out. I have a ton of content on there that's kind of similar to this. I do a lot of webinars and I do post instructionals on there as well. Subscribe on the way out. That helps build the channel. I want to get the channel to 20K subscribers soon. That's like my short-term goal. So please make that happen by subscribing and sharing the video. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see y'all in the next one. God bless.